at the time I was there, they wound up putting, I want to call it like over 90% of staff on the production line, even if you were, an engineer, or in my case, a person on the business side. And so they issued us, and I kid you not, this is actually like factually true. They issued us hard hats, steel-toed shoes, and they had us sign up for shifts. And these shifts were, either 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on the line.
I'm trying to think where I'm going here to take your analogy and run with it, but I'm going to try and find an endpoint. I'm going to get there. Will, feel free to step in and save me.
I'm trying to resist drawing any actual sort of comparisons around the actual impacts of these things, but
yeah, because you have naturally got a climate impact from the use of cryptocurrency as well, right? Well, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the stream, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation featuring guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action in the world of water and beyond. My name is Tom Steyer. I'm an environmental journalist specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarney, a water strategy advisor and investor, doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
And we are, of course, very thrilled to be back with our next season, focusing on water and nature. And a big thanks to our ongoing partner and sponsor, Raymond James, and our charity partner, Frank Water. And we are delighted today to welcome Ida Hempel, who's a VP at Galvanize, a climate-focused global investment firm. So Ida, great to see you, and thanks for joining us.
yes, good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Very good. So, Ida, we've got lots we want to talk to you about today. And typically we sort of like to get, I think, the origin story of all of our guests, which we'd love to have from yourself. But I think it would also be good for some context to kind of talk a little bit about the origin story of Galvanize. And, for those of regular listeners will no doubt be aware, it's like a record, $1 billion fund, your innovation expansion fund that was announced in September 2023. So, and obviously one of the co-founders, Tom Steyer, behind it is a well-recognized name. So it'd be great to kind of hear about maybe the origin story of Galvanize, kind of Tom's vision and values at the time, and kind of how that's looking today as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I myself have spent my sort of whole, career in sustainable investing. And so, I think my own path to Galvanize was that I'm a California person, grew up always in, trying to square the sort of market forces of Silicon Valley with the fact that I enjoyed sort of the California outdoors so much. But what I found in joining Galvanize was really kind of a like-minded, leadership team that was actually trying to square that same question. When I think about the founding of Galvanize, so Galvanize was founded by Tom Steyer and Katie Hall. And both of them are longtime leaders in both the fields of investment management, but also in climate and sustainability. Tom obviously founded Fairlawn Capital to great success over the years. Katie Hall built Hall Capital. And so, I think at the point that they started formulating Galvanize, we'd kind of seen an interesting trajectory in the climate investment space. You'd obviously had Clean Tech 1.0, a bunch of capital come in and then exit. And then, I'd say, and this sort of maps to my own experience of when I, started working in climate venture capital at the Emerson Collective, but around 2015, 2016, you started seeing family offices move back into climate investing. You started seeing more and more seed and venture funds start to move back into the space. And then around the time that Tom and Katie and the rest of the founding sort of team of Galvanize started to come together, this, call this sort of like the late teens, right? 2018, 2019, 2020, the climate investment space was moving to a place where you really needed scale capital to build some of these businesses. And so there was a bit of a sort of a step change in what was required in the ecosystem. And so, Tom and Katie really established Galvanize to be a purpose-built firm for energy transition and climate transition. Recognizing both that the transition requires capital across different asset classes. So although, we launched with the innovation and expansion team, which is our venture and growth strategy, there was, always the recognition that we would need to develop strategies that could not only tackle other areas where capital is needed, but actually sort of seize the opportunity in those other corners of the universe. And that's why we have things now like our public equity strategy and our real estate platform. And there was also a recognition that to um, to really sort of go after and capture some of the underlying opportunities within climate and energy transition, you need sort of very particular expertise. And I think you both know this as very much specialists at this sort of, water, nature, climate nexus. Um, but that was actually built into the sort of the design of Galvanize from the get-go, that not only do you need world-class investment talent across all of these different asset classes, but you also need policy expertise, the ability to shape end markets and standards, the ability to do impact measurement really well, the ability to understand what's sort of the full range of decarbonization pathways under a orderly or disorderly transition. And so the firm was actually built to not only have these different investment verticals, but then also to have a platform that housed this expertise and really sort of allowed all of our investment teams to seize that multi-stakeholder perspective, both as an input into the investment process and then also to sharpen the value creation we do with our portfolio companies and with the categories that we ultimately back. So that I say was kind of the crux of it. Yeah, we rolled out the innovation expansion strategy first. We now have a couple different investment businesses, and we are off to the races.
Ida, that's a really fascinating journey. You brought up public policy and actually shaping proactively what policies will facilitate and accelerate decarbonization and addressing some of the other issues such as water. Do your investments, your portfolio companies, in quotes, understand that, or is that something that you help them think through and move on?
I'd say where we focus our insight as Galvanize is having a deep policy network and having policy experts in our platform that help our company sort of navigate what's right around the corner. And that is our emphasis. Where we lend our voice to support things that would help the categories we invest in. For instance, I look at California 253 and 261 around the California disclosure directives. We will of course do so, but I would say a lot of it is around really gleaning the investment insight we need to understand sort of who's best positioned at the point of investment, and then helping our portfolio companies navigate.
Yeah, the reason I sort of picked on that is that what I've seen in the world of water is that companies that are in the gray water recycling technology sector sort of approach it differently. Some companies will look at, for example, the US market and say, too fragmented, I can't influence public policy, and not even influence, but engage on public policy to move where that technology can be adopted. And others will say, well, I'm really comfortable in terms of engaging with the public sector and regulators and want to work with them. And the latter has actually been more successful. So, I mean, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but I think it's really my take is, your position on that and your subject matter expertise and understanding policy and how to engage with public policy folks is really,
Yes.
really valuable.
You make a good point, which is that is another thing that we definitely do counsel our firms on as well. In fact, I think I was just in a conversation like this with one of our companies just 2 weeks ago around like, how do you build those teams? Like, how do you structure them? Like when you're a growth stage company, when you're raising a Series B, for instance, you're 50 people strong. Like, what is the appropriate level of resourcing to put towards that? So that's something we definitely get into with our companies. I thought you were going to go somewhere different with the question, which is, should you pick companies that are, sort of where their entire business case is sort of predicated on certain policies passing or not? And of course, what I would say is, we're always trying to back businesses that, have a business case regardless. But of course, given the context we live in, it's important to.
So I know I didn't go there, but that's a really, really good point that if you're hitching your wagon, so to speak, on either a current regulation or some assumptions about where the regulations are going to go, that adds a whole other level of risk to, an investment and the ability to actually scale that
Oh,
business
absolutely.
to commercial viability. And I agree with you. Steer away personally from investments like that, and also, don't counsel anybody to be married to that approach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think obviously like having a compliance mandate can really supercharge your market, but we're always, looking for solutions and businesses that can also have use cases beyond compliance, because at the end of the day, whether you're talking water or climate, compliance can't really be like the end point, right? I mean,
Right,
like,
right.
especially like when I think about like things like data disclosure, like the point of data or insights is that it has to actually generate or inform some kind of action. So,
Right.
and so we're always looking for to make sure that that business case is clear.
Agree.
Edith, so I'm interested because I started looking at some of the portfolio companies and the bracket of, I mean, a climate focused global investment firm, and it's everything from kind of companies offering a more sustainable method of concrete manufacturing, right, through to geothermal power, through to lots of different areas, supply chain optimization. So I'm interested to kind of hear from you of the intersection with water. And you've kind of got the climate movement and the water movement, which are
Mhm.
typically seen very separate, but they're, as we know, completely interlinked. And no doubt all of these businesses touch water, they have an embedded water usage. So how kind of much do you see these portfolio companies actually as a water play as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was waiting for this question. um, well, yeah, and it's so surprising to me that they're seen as different movements. I'm sure this will be kind of a multi-hour conversation,
Mm,
reaffirming how we see them sort of as deeply interlinked. What I would say is it's interesting for me to reflect on the galvanized journey. I think um, at a or even sort of my journey in sustainable investing prior to galvanize, I think water impacts have always been seen as sort of broadly part of a climate informed investment
Hmm.
process, right?
hmm
And something you might want to diligence when you think about sort of other environmental risks that you are looking at with respect to a particular opportunity or asset. But if I think about when we really sort of just really started to sort of step up our own water engagement at Galvanize, um, it was kind of an emergent property of our portfolio. We're looking for places where there's a clear business case for action, as I said, beyond compliance, beyond sustainability commitments, where there's a
hmm
clear economic case today. And again, I think this is something that you two can, attest to in myriad more scenarios than even I can. But for us, it really started to be a value driver for some of our portfolio companies. I think you're well familiar with some of our companies like Arable, which does crop intelligence for growers and
Hmm.
businesses basically deploy sensors and software into the field, but they can
hmm
actually scale water replenishment businesses on the back of that. But then we see a bunch of other businesses as well. Like we have another company called Regrow, which is deploying regenerative ag solutions across supply chains for big CPGs and agribusinesses. And obviously, there's a big water co-benefit there as well.
hmm
We have a company called Worldly, which is works with tens of thousands of different apparel companies and manufacturers to measure all types of environmental data, labor impacts, but also water is a piece of that. And so it it became sort of just increasingly clear this is an important cross portfolio driver of value and business in the immediate term, and that's just talking about our venture and growth portfolio. And then I'd say it's kind of it's broadened over the years to be a consideration in the public equities context. And then I'll also add it's also very much a consideration in our real estate platform as well. So we have a real estate investment vertical where we purchase certain categories of existing buildings within multifamily, industrial, a couple of other categories. And then we actually apply sort of a decarbonization playbook to these buildings to not only manage their emissions, but also generate a green premium over time. And we've actually built in sort of potable water efficiency and reduction is a piece of that playbook as well. So, anyways, but zooming out, the point being, I would say it began as emergent property of our portfolio, but increasingly has become a consideration across sort of all asset classes for us.
It strikes me that broad view of investments that would fit under a climate focused fund is, I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's not that common. I mean, there are other climate funds out there that, they might be interested in water, but they're not going to place a bet on a water tech company or an ag tech company. And what you've done is say, well, a lot of different things are part of the whole climate conversation. Certainly ag, and I find what you're doing in real estate to be really interesting. So yeah, it strikes me that you've got not just a broader view, but a more sophisticated view of what would fit within your mission and investment thesis.
Yeah, and I would extend that to say that I think what's important in climate investing is to realize it's not, or at least our approach, our distinct approach to it is it's not about sort of having very prescriptive pathways and sort of investing in things that exactly match a pathway, because you don't actually sort of know exactly what the world will look like. In point of fact, the sort of path that we're on sort of keeps rapidly changing in new directions.
Right.
It's really more I would say an approach and a mindset to sort of uncover like value where there actually is value, if that makes sense. So I think because that's our orientation more than saying like, XYZ specific is going to happen, that allows us to, flexibly, again, like I think that's sort of part of the sort of the water story in our climate story as well.
When you were answering that, the word curious came to mind. Like, you seem to be a curious company and explore what investments make sense as part of your, again, investment thesis and strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very much so. And I think it's interesting also to just reflect on how the categories we look at evolve over time, right? I think climate adaptation and resilience are rising again as the case for pursuing them actually rises as well. Right, we've spent more time in physical risk and resilience, and then obviously again, a longer conversation, but speed to compute and everything around speed to compute, energy systems, water systems, the physical infrastructure, right. Data centers. These are also categories we probably weren't spending as much time in 4 years ago. But you have to be flexible, I think, to recognize how things change.
Do you think part of the challenge, and Will, going back to a few seasons ago, do you remember we had a founder of a tech company, and it was a software play, but it was an urban water play, which ultimately had energy and resilience benefits. But part of the conversation, she referenced when they were raising finance, they repositioned away from being a water tech company to being a kind of climate play, because there was so many more benefits from being a pure play water company. And I've spoken to a few companies where they're just, because you can list the number of water tech investors pretty much on one hand. I mean, it's grown from one or two to, okay, maybe we're going to go on to two hands by the end of season 9 of the podcast. They are increasing, but actually that's too narrow a field for a lot of companies. So actually, if they look at the wider benefits of what they're doing, it's not just the water that they're treating. And it just helped them to kind of appeal to a broader range of climate tech companies. I wondered if, and I think it's really clever how Galvanize is going about it, not in these prescriptive buckets, because actually these things do have a climate benefit through water usage, through energy, through waste reduction, without actually kind of being very prescriptive. So yeah, it's smart. But I wondered if you had any thoughts on when the companies are looking for finance and you're in those conversations, kind of how they position themselves to make them more appealing to Galvanize.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because sometimes it behooves a company to create a new category, right? I've seen that as well, where by creating the new category, you can define it, position yourself as a market leader, shape behavior around it. So sometimes I see sort of that as being like as the play, but yes, also take your point that that when you're trying to break into a particular ecosystem of investors, broadening the terminology you use can be can be useful. I mean, I guess I'd say this. I think for companies with any genuine sort of environmental benefit, whether that be biodiversity or water related or some aspect of climate, I think it always behooves a company to think holistically about what its benefits are, right?
Mm.
And I also think when companies, this applies to like when you're putting together an investor syndicate or you're putting together a board, you always want to bring in a broad range of expertise, right? You're going to want different board members who bring in different someone who can
Mhm.
help you think about future financing, someone who can help you think about your go to market, someone who can help you think about talent, and same applies to investor syndicates, right? So hypothetically, if I was if I was like a very early stage company, and I actually had multiple types of co-benefits, I might actually try to find backing from investors from each of those ecosystems, because again, like I think implicit in your question is it's kind of they aren't closed groups, but they are groups of people who convene,
Right.
build expertise and knowledge together. So you'd actually want to find a way to make sure that you are able to access all of those different communities.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Because each of those investors from those different disciplines will bring a different ecosystem and contact base towards
Exactly.
the portfolio company, right? So,
Exactly. So if you are a company that can span multiple, I actually go back to the Arable example a little bit, because Arable already had like a substantial book of business in crop intelligence and precision ag prior to entering the water replenishment business, and so they've sort of now they're sort of navigating a totally new category, which is its
Mhm.
own set of customer personas, own set of contacts. So, anyways.
I, I think there's also the social dimension to it. And you touched on this, Ida, a bit, but companies that had a value proposition around climate and water and energy, some of them have the ability to fine-tune their value proposition to deliver social benefit.
Hmm.
And there's a company that I'm working with that it's a leak detection company, but they focus on affordable housing. And that has a social benefit, and there's an ability
mm,
to take a portion of the savings and invest it in the community, the housing projects. So, all of this seems to be evolving rather quickly in terms of people looking very broadly around, like what is the value proposition, with respect to sustainability at large. And that's exciting. It's actually sort of a good time in a way.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't believe I said that, by the way, that it's a good time. But
there we
I,
go. Some
I,
optimism on the.
well,
No, we are on the stream is always optimistic, but
we're
it's good to.
optimistic, right? Fearless optimism, Tom.
What I
There we
meant,
go.
not optimism is a rarity on the stream, but optimism in with the current
Yes.
news and everything going on is
hmm
a welcome relief. Yeah,
I, well, what else are you going to do?
exactly.
The alternative is not very satisfying. And the optimism thing, it it's about innovation. It's about thinking, differently about what are the challenges and, what are the investments and,
Mm.
the entrepreneurs that are really doing some things that are very creative. So I don't know. It's exciting because it's creative.
Well, and I'm with you. I mean, the headlines are are sobering these days. Like I'm not gonna say that
Hmm.
that they're otherwise, but there continues to be like an incredible group of people that continue to build really interesting things that will I believe persist despite the headlines. So
Mm.
Right?
I'm
Unreasonable people,
yeah.
Ida.
Yes,
You,
exactly.
you're in that category, by the way. So,
Very honored.
So, sort of talking about, without perhaps us reflecting too much on the political situation on either side of the Atlantic, Can you maybe kind of reflect upon how you see some of the investment trends? I know you've got quite an interesting analogy between the kind of interest and kind of momentum behind kind of interesting climate solutions and also cryptocurrency as well. I'd love. I think it's you've mentioned to us before. I'd love to kind of for our audience to hear it as well.
Well, let me broaden that question to
Yeah.
say that you know, again, as I said, like some of the current headlines are sobering, and like as you know, as of today, like September 2025, the IRA is being dismantled. This is going to have real, if marginal, impacts on the rate of deployment in certain categories. Like these things are all actually happening,
Hmm.
and so I think these are things that folks in our space are wrestling with. Um, that said, like, the fundamentals of climate and energy transition don't actually change, right? A livable planet is something that benefits us all. And many climate solutions and energy transition opportunities are in fact either already cheaper or well on track to already be cheaper. So there's a strong case for in many things, just regardless of policy, like these things will sort of will win in the market eventually. Um, and 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 so I think what we're observing obviously is like a certain sort of news cycle and political cycle, but I reflect a little bit on crypto sitting here in Silicon Valley, which without going into all of it has been through its own sort of interesting cycle in the last 2 years. Just 2 years ago, you could barely say the C word. There was deep regulatory scrutiny of it. I think consumer sentiment was certainly lower, but there were people who continued to see the value of building these decentralized processes and opportunities, and kept hacking away at it. And in just 2 years, things have changed quite meaningfully. There's much more bipartisan backing of it,
Hmm.
and obviously consumer sentiment has changed, and I want to sort of separate this a little bit. Yeah, I think it's something more specific than business cycles. I don't think we're like in a business cycle or particular investment cycle with climate. It's more that these winds that shift, they're more rapid than. So all to say, my current working theory is that these cycles have really sped up some of these behavioral cycles, and I think we're in a certain set of headlines today. I think that the sentiment shifts can move pretty quickly, and then fundamentally there's the value of looking for things that are going to win in the market hasn't actually changed at all.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, especially with cryptocurrency, not to kind of get into the weeds too much on that one, but it was essentially seen as a movement, and then it's been quite volatile, and some people have lost a lot of money on cryptocurrency, but there's been some winners as well. People have made a lot of money on crypto when they kind of got in early. But I think inherently there remains a lot of sort of skepticism with it to the mass market, right? If you talk about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding about it as well, and how and I can see where the analogy is, because at the same time there's still a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation on climate change and the impact on climate change as well, right? So I'm trying to think where I'm going here to take your analogy and run with it, but I'm going to try and find an end point. I'm going to get there. Will, feel free to step in and save me.
I'm trying to resist the drawing any actual sort of comparisons around the actual impacts of these things, but
Yeah, because you have naturally got a climate impact from the use of cryptocurrency as well, right? Because it's data centers and it's a digital currency, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole different discussion. But
I think. Oh, go ahead, Will.
Ida, I think we need to save Tom. So just a heads up.
Please do.
I was gonna say I'll leave it at this. They're both complicated topics, right? I think one other parallel is there's the inherent complexity. I would like for us to. I think there continues to be opportunity to simplify our mental models around climate, decarbonization,
Right.
and
Right.
adaptation. I actually think conversations like this where we're trying to merge the movements of water and nature and climate, these are positive things. But yeah, I think the narrative complexity of it is something that is really difficult.
Eh, So in our attempt to save you, Tom, I'm just going to add a little bit of a geeky comment here that, listening to both of you, including you, Tom, I
Mm.
was reminded of how cycles of innovation have sped up over the past few decades. And, Ida, to your point, I think that's exactly what we're seeing, that change is happening faster and new technologies are really shortening the cycle for innovation quite a bit.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
did that help you, Tom, at all, or was that just like
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
did that
appreciate
fall
the.
flat?
No, it didn't. No, I
I,
appreciate the
I
helping hand. I'm going to take it and run with Ida's comment about the when you come across companies that are kind of making their own market, right? So market makers, and I think the classic example is people always talk about Uber. They say, hey, what's the Uber of water? What's the Uber of climate? Whereas I
oh,
think that's not, I really hate that expression because I think the disruption that happened with the taxi industry and what Uber did is it's very hard to kind of do a direct kind of approach within, say, water treatment, for example. But another company, and this is where I'm going to make a segue, um, is Tesla and the electric vehicle market. Right? Do you like that, Will? How I did that? And I know, Ida,
yeah,
you actually before Galvanize spent some time at Tesla, which you could say has been a bit of a market maker, right, in the electric
Some
vehicles.
might say, indeed, some might
There
say.
you go. The segue has worked really well. We've almost done
wow.
this before, right? So yeah, can you maybe talk a bit about that, your time at Tesla, kind of lessons learned pre-Galvanize and kind of some of the, because we hear a lot of stories about Tesla and we hear a lot of stories about the current CEO of Tesla as well. So I'd love to kind of hear about your time there and yeah, and what you learned.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I was part of the new markets and business development team at Tesla, which was and is responsible for doing exactly that, sort of incubating new product lines,
Mm,
thinking about Tesla's go to market into new regions and new strategies. And so they've done a wide range of really exciting things. Everything from working on initial charging networks to the Tesla storage to when I was there, I was actually working on the Tesla Semi.
mm,
And so, I
Oh,
had the fun job. I think, two of my specific, tasks at the time were thinking through, exactly what the range, the like, what sort of the battery pack sizing should be for the Tesla in light of the likely range of its use, and then
oh,
also thinking through what sort of Tesla semi charging infrastructure could look like, given that it would sort of need dedicated charging to reflect these different sort of trucker routes. So that was a very fun and exciting project. What I will say was it was also just an interesting time to be at Tesla. So I was there sort of around the 2018 period, and I feel like it's hard to like reach back into as to where Tesla was back then. But at that point in time, Tesla was not sort of quite as, even as proven as it is now. And so I was there sort of in the wake of the Model 3 production crisis, when Tesla was massively behind on delivering Model 3s. And it was something that was, there was an enormous amount of like public public market interest in this.
mm,
This was a news story every
mm,
single day. Um, at the time I was there, they wound up putting I want to call it like over 90% of staff on the production line, even if you were, an engineer or in my case, a person in on the business side. And so they issued us, and I kid you not, this is actually like factually true. They issued us hard hats, steel-toed shoes, and they had us sign up for shifts. And these shifts were, either 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on the line. And
wow.
this went like through that summer. I think the and also just as additional backdrop, again, this is all sort of publicly available
Hmm.
information, but this was during the period that Elon was tweeting about, he was talking to some sovereigns in the Gulf around a take private deal of Tesla. And it was really a wild time to be there. But when I think about what did I take away from it, and going back, Tom, to your well stated question about
Thank you,
market
Ida. Thank you.
making.
Yeah.
There we go. We closed the loop.
Like, I think there was a lot to sort of take away from the situation. Like, and obviously Tesla has been successful. So I think thing one is when we think about all these different climate or water solutions, oftentimes with a hard tech component, a capital intensive, aspect to their scaling, just you need a lot of hustle. Like when I think about being on the production line, there's just sheer hustle involved in like building and scaling up these solutions and getting it to like, to market scale. So that was one big takeaway from it was that I almost like look for in our companies, right? It's like if you want to make it, you're going to have some aspects in your scaling journey where there isn't like an obvious bridge. You don't have time to hire folks. Like you just need to go. And that worked out, right? That they crossed the line with the Model 3s. The second piece is, obviously Tesla did not undertake the take private at that point in time, but I think it does highlight the need for creative financing in some of these solutions. Again, not exactly following Elon's model at the time, but I think that's also like a very applicable lesson to companies in their scaling journeys.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other piece that I also have really taken away from that experience is just for me it was like a microcosm of all these different stages of a market's evolution, right? Like you had the Tesla Semi, which was at the at the very sort of early stages of market entry, right? It had some reservation holders. There was no like infrastructure around it. Like you're just kind of convincing early evangelists. And you have like the Model 3s, right? Which were sort of in this, there's like some momentum build, but there's some sort of operational stops and starts, but the cost curves haven't totally come down. That's like part of the bet you're making and like scaling up production, right? And then you think about like where Tesla is today, where it's like, we're not like the penetration we need to be of EVs, but like actually it's a much more mature market. It's very well understood. And actually what you're seeing is like Tesla's lack of, I don't want to say lack of defensibility, but you're seeing like erosion of its share in many regions of the world as now that there's mature other, competitors. So yeah, those are my takeaways from my very crazy time at Tesla.
It's super interesting. No, you're absolutely right about, I mean, if you look at the impact of like Chinese electric vehicles as well, and companies like BYD, Build Your Dreams, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but Xiaomi is a Chinese tech company that's now getting into electric vehicles and how just the market growth. But yeah, it's a really entertaining story because I think there's a lot of analogies with scaling and the fact it doesn't matter where you are in the business to kind of roll up your sleeves and get involved, right, in part of a business. But I think it's also part of the time with which you're at Tesla. It was kind of you were almost leading a movement. So did you think that helped the troops around you, regardless of the role, regardless if you're in the C-suite? It's like, guys, we're part of something here. Let's all roll up our sleeves, get down, do our 12-hour shift on the factory floor, because Tesla is kind of, as we go back to that market maker phrase, right, before the competition came in and the market share has gone down. So I think it's a really interesting time and great story, by the way, as well. So
Yeah, no, but absolutely. I think I'm sure you both feel this as well, but like having a sense of mission and purpose is deeply motivating, right? Like I think if you were, an engineer and you just wanted to kick back and hang out, I don't think you would have gone to Tesla at the time. But the folks who are there, like it was deeply motivating of really the sense of being down in the trenches and just trying to get it across the line. So yeah, absolutely. And actually that I would say that was, that would be a sort of another sort of insider takeaway from my time at Tesla was the extent to which mission can be a motivating force and glue for organizations, right? Like, and to be clear, like I enjoyed my time there. But you have to realize there were no perks. Like, Tesla's actually, at least, at the time I was there, very hard charging, hours are long. There are no free snacks. There was a trough of Cheerios in the kitchen. That was it. But that's not why we showed up.
Right.
I love that. That's very cool. So to kind of bring us home, Ida, can you talk a bit about kind of the next chapter for Galvanize? Kind of what we can expect from you guys in the coming months, coming years?
Great question. Well, we have a lot of exciting announcements ahead, which I would love to share with your community in due course. I think I think continue to expect us to do, more exciting deals across climate and energy transition. Um, and I think success for us will be, continuing to shape and back the winners in this arena. I think personally, I'm excited for us to do more work in water, more work in nature-based solutions. I'm also interested to see how we can, not only continue to back opportunities in North America and Europe, but also potentially in emerging markets down the line. But that's all, probably. Some of that might be sort of, further down the line, but I'd say for the near term, we're going to continue what we're doing.
Amazing work. Well, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate the insight. I think the origin story of yourself and Galvanize as well as the strategy you mentioned about being scale. I mean, being the first, well, not the first, but $1 billion fund in climate certainly has scale. So yeah, thanks so much for your time, Ida. We've really appreciate it. Will, any kind of final thoughts from yourself?
I just go back to the excitement of the moment in terms of working with people that are committed, passionate, creative. That's a gift. I mean, despite the
Absolutely.
chaos, it's a gift.
Mm.
So, yeah, I just feel
I,
fortunate to be part of a community like that.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. No. Oh, definitely. I
I,
very much agree.
good. Onward.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Ida. It's been a pleasure having you on, and yeah, let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Alrighty,
Take
thanks.
care.
Take
Bye.
care.